Welcome back to another week at Waffle-Free Storytelling. It's Tina Konstant here. And because the jibber jabber is exactly where it belongs, right at the end, we're leaping right into this week's story, which is called The Greatest Warrior. It's a story about Bowkitchie. Now, Bowkitchie wasn't just any warrior. He was the greatest power in this king's army, standing taller and mightier than anyone in any rank. The fact is, there were some battalions who refused to go to battle unless Bowkitchie was there. His very presence made them feel strong and invincible. It was that faith and belief in him that was like the glue between them and the iron around them. Battle after battle, war after war, Bowkitchie brought victory home, until after many years, when a time came when all nations were defeated and there were no more battles, and the natural outcome was peace. Now here's the thing, every other soldier was glad for it. They went home to their families, and they fell in love with the earth, planting and sowing and harvesting and living with the natural rhythms of the seasons in the arms of the people they loved. Bowkitchie, of course, well, he had never known peace. Where his comrades in arms had gone home between battles, Bowkitchie was such an essential force he would leave one fight and join another. The only haven he had ever known was his tent. The only food he had eaten was what he could catch on the road, and the only peace he had ever experienced was that brief moment before the trumpet sounded, and like a silent prayer, every soul on the battlefield begged to be spared. So when there were no more battles, well, Bowkitchie found himself at a loss. He very quickly discovered that farming wasn't for him. So he took up with a blacksmith. But that wasn't for him either, so he took up carpentry. That wasn't really his thing, and so he took up baking, and so he went through every trade known to humankind to try and find where his soul would fit. Now, as you can imagine, while Bowkitchie travelled the land searching for his trade, people flocked to him. He was a legend, after all, a hero, the greatest warrior the world had ever known. And so while he was farming or making bread or trying his hand at any other thing, the people gathered and begged him to tell his stories. "Tell us about the battle at Innes Forge," they said. And so Bowkitchie told the stories, but not his story. Never his own story. He told the tales of his fellow soldiers, especially those who had died. How Samuel Six-Fingers McGee had carved a path through the enemy and caught an arrow in the eye at the very last hurdle, but because of his actions the victory was theirs. Or Miriam's spellbinder Wiley, who seemed to know the path the enemy would take just by sniffing the air, and how she had died protecting the lines. On and on, story after story, never the same story twice, because there was never a need. So many had died in battle. Now, these stories naturally made it through the valleys and over the hilltops, across the rivers and the lakes, and reached the families of those brave men and women. Their stories, while they were told and retold, and in the retelling, those who had died in battle became giants. They became heroes in their own rights and magnificent victors. And so it was the years passed, and Bowkitchie kept searching for a trade and telling the stories, and the heroes of those stories kept growing and growing, until one day Bowkitchie arrived in a small village. Now, as always, the people were excited. The great Bowkitchie was coming. The stories he told had already reached the village, and the heroes in those tales loomed large. Bowkitchie was in this village really to learn how to make shoes. As always, though, as soon as he arrived, the crowd gathered. "He's here!" they whispered, and the crowd stared at Bowkitchie. It was a young girl who stepped forward, really no more than 9. She touched Bowkitchie's hand. "You're not as big as I imagined," she said. And Bowkitchie smiled. Then a boy stepped forward, probably no more than 10. "You aren't tall or wide as I thought you would be," the boy said. And Bowkitchie grinned. Then another child stepped forward and stared at him for a long time, and finally said, "You're a man, just like my dad." And Bowkitchie clapped his hands together, and he said, This is where I will stay." And he accepted the apprenticeship with the shoemaker. Now people still came to Bowkitchie for his stories, but from that day on, all of his stories started with "once upon a time" and involved fierce battles with dragons and kings and queens and fairies and goblins and talking chairs and happy cats. And here's the thing, the story of Bowkitchie, who told such magnificent tales of faraway worlds where victory was always had, where there was always a happy ever after, where dragons were always slain, and love was always won. These stories spread across the lands. With every telling, they got bigger and wilder and more thrilling and more amazing. And when Bowkitchie passed many, many years later, with all of his stories told and spread across the world, he became an immortal. And to this day, he is still called the greatest warrior of all time. There you go, everybody. There you go. A short little tale about the stories we tell and the stories we're told, and how stories grow. And the best ones just keep going. So, hey, how's your week been? How's your day been? What adventures have you had? What dragons have you slain? What victories are yours? I've been for a walk in the woods with the dogs today. It was very good. And I'm about to have a cup of tea. Oh my gosh, I live a simple life. All right, beautiful human. Look, have a fantastic day. Drop around to www.tinakonstant.com. If you haven't joined the fireside yet, then fill out that little form there. It would be great to see you inside. All right, that's it. Hug the people you love, and have a beautiful day. And I will see you next week for wild and woolly adventures from the Waffle-Free universe. Okay, bye-bye now.